Welcome to our channel. Today, we dive into the world of the most disturbing bedtime stories that will send chills down your spine. We'll journey into the darkest corners of imagination where fear takes hold and nightmares come to life. These tales are not for the faint-hearted, so grab a blanket and prepare yourself for a night of terror. Let's begin our descent into darkness. Imagine a dusty attic, cobwebs clinging to every surface, the air thick with decay. A single ray of moonlight slices through the gloom, illuminating a child's rocking chair, swaying gently back and forth. Clutched in the chair's embrace, a porcelain doll, its painted smile eerily cheerful. This is where our story begins, the story of a doll possessed by a spirit of vengeance. A young girl named Sophie received the doll as a gift from her grandmother. From the moment Sophie laid eyes on the doll, she felt an unsettling presence. Nights were the worst. Sophie would lie awake, paralyzed by fear, as she heard the distinct, slow creak of the rocking chair. Peeking through her fingers, she'd catch a glimpse of the doll, rocking back and forth, its vacant eyes following her every move. Then, the whispering would start, soft at first, like the rustle of leaves. But as the nights wore on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, culminating in a name whispered over and over again: Sophie. Driven to the brink by terror, Sophie confided in her grandmother, who revealed a dark secret. A tale whispered through generations of a young girl who had died tragically a century ago, her spirit now trapped within the doll. Following her grandmother's instructions, Sophie took the doll back to the attic. She placed the doll back in the rocking chair, the same chair the real girl had cherished in life. With trembling hands, Sophie lit a candle and recited the words passed down through generations. The attic grew deathly still. The rocking chair creaked to a stop. The whispering ceased. Sophie hoped with all her might that the spirit had finally found peace. Our next tale takes us to a crumbling Victorian mansion perched on a windswept cliff. Within its decaying walls lived a solitary writer, Edward, seeking solace and inspiration. Little did he know, his darkest fears were about to bleed into reality. Edward's study was a sanctuary, filled with the comforting scent of old books and pipe tobacco. It was here in the dead of night that he first noticed it, a shadow, darker than the surrounding gloom, lurking in the corner. At first he dismissed it as a trick of the light, but as the nights wore on, the shadow grew more distinct, taking on a vaguely humanoid form. Edward couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching him. Fear began to take root in Edward's mind. He tried to ignore the shadow, immersing himself in his writing. One stormy night, Edward could take it no longer. The shadow had grown bolder, its edges sharper. Mustering courage, Edward grabbed a heavy silver candlestick and approached the shadow. As he drew closer, he heard a faint whisper, like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "Show yourself," he shouted. The only response was the howl of the wind and the drumming of rain. The shadow seemed to melt back into the gloom. Edward had confronted the shadow, but he was far from feeling victorious. From that night forward, Edward never felt truly alone in the old house. Our journey into the macabre now leads us to a small, forgotten town nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains. At the edge of this isolated town stood an old farmhouse, its paint peeling, its windows like vacant eyes. It was here that a young couple, Sarah and David, seeking a fresh start, unwittingly inherited a legacy of terror. From the moment they crossed the threshold, an unsettling feeling washed over them. It began subtly, a feeling of being watched. Then the whispers started. At first they were faint, almost imperceptible. But as the days turned into nights, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The whispers were never clear, always just beyond comprehension. But they carried a chilling tone, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and malice. One evening, Sarah was home alone, unpacking boxes in the attic. Suddenly she heard her name, whispered clearly, distinctly, from the far corner of the attic. Her blood ran cold. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Slowly she turned towards the source of the whisper. The attic was empty, save for the dusty trunks and forgotten relics. That night, Sarah told David about what she had heard. He tried to comfort her but couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, David began researching the history of the house. Piece by piece, a horrifying story began to emerge, a tale of tragedy, betrayal, and a darkness that refused to be silenced. The whispers had begun to invade his dreams as well, planting seeds of doubt and fear. David discovered that the farmhouse had once been home to a young family, a farmer, his wife, and their infant child. The family had been tragically torn apart by an illness that swept through the valley. The farmer, driven to madness by grief, was said to have taken his own life within the walls of the farmhouse. Locals whispered that the farmer's sorrow lingered within the house. Armed with this chilling knowledge, David knew they had to act. He consulted with the town librarian, who told him about an ancient ritual to soothe troubled spirits. The ritual involved placing objects of significance to the deceased in the center of the house, along with a source of light and a symbol of peace. As the sun set, David and Sarah gathered the necessary items. They found an old family photo, the farmer's wife cradling their infant child. They placed the photo on the living room floor, along with a lit candle and a single white rose. As darkness enveloped the farmhouse, David and Sarah stood hand in hand. Suddenly, they heard it, a soft, mournful melody, like a lullaby sung from beyond the grave. The sound seemed to emanate from the very walls, swirling around them. The lullaby grew louder, more insistent, and then as quickly as it had begun, it stopped. The candle flickered once, then went out, plunging the house into darkness. David and Sarah stood there for a moment, unsure of what to expect. Then they heard it. A soft sigh, barely audible, as if a great weight had been lifted. The whispers were gone, replaced by an eerie silence that was both unsettling and strangely comforting. As dawn broke, David and Sarah emerged from the farmhouse, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The house, once a source of terror, now seemed strangely peaceful. They had faced the ghosts of the past and found a sense of closure. With renewed hope, they set about restoring the farmhouse. The house seemed to respond to their love and care. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm for David and Sarah. The nightmares that had plagued their sleep faded into distant memories. The farmhouse had become their sanctuary. However, their newfound peace was not to last. One stormy night, David awoke with a start. A cold sweat clung to his skin, and his heart pounded against his ribs. He sat up in bed, his eyes scanning the darkened room. That's when he heard it. A soft, mournful melody, like a lullaby sung from beyond the grave. Panic surged through David. He reached out for Sarah, but his hand met only empty sheets. He scrambled out of bed and raced to the nursery. The crib was empty. He spun around, his eyes wide with terror. The lullaby grew louder, more insistent, and then he saw her. Sarah stood in the doorway, her back to him, her arms cradling something close to her chest. Slowly Sarah turned, her face illuminated by a flash of lightning. It wasn't their child she held in her arms. It was a porcelain doll, its painted smile eerily cheerful in the darkness. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed these terrifying tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more spine-chilling stories. We've journeyed together into the darkest corners of imagination, where fear takes hold and nightmares come to life. Remember these tales as you drift off to sleep, and let them serve as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create in our own minds. Sweet dreams, if you can sleep.